Hi guys, I'm sitting outside on the patio because Mr. Andrew is trying to sleep. We're lo- we're trying to figure out this whole jet lag thing and being in the US and working in the middle of the night when you guys are in school. So I'm sitting out on the patio and I'm going to read to you. So I'm going to read chapters 2 and 3 today. So chapter 2 is called Dreams. Every spring and fall during the holidays of Big Eid and Small Eid, my family visited one of my favorite places on earth, Shangla. And you guys know, I'm sorry if I say the words wrong, the mountain village where my parents grew up. Laden with presents for our relatives, embroidered shawls, boxes of rose and pistachio sweets, and medicines they couldn't get in the village. We'd go to the Mingora bus station and see just about everybody else in town, all crowded together and waiting for the flying coach. We'd stack our gifts along with our sacks of flour and sugar, blankets, and trunks that other families were taking on top of the bus in a great towering pile. Then we all crammed inside for the 4-hour trip up winding, rutted roads to the mountains. For the first quarter of the journey, the road was a series of zigs and zags that followed the Swat River on one side and hugged sheer cliffs on the other. My brothers took great pleasure in pointing out the wreckage of vehicles that had fallen into the valley below. That sounds terrifying. The flying coach would climb higher and higher until the air turned cool and crisp. Eventually, we saw nothing but mountain after mountain. Mountain, 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 and just a sliver of sky. Many of the people in Shangla were very poor and did not have modern facilities such as hospitals and markets, but our family always put on a huge feast for us when we arrived. A feast that was especially welcome at Small Eid, which marks the end of a month of daytime fasting for Ramadan. There were bowls of chicken and rice, spinach and lamb, big crunchy apples, pretty yellow cakes, and big kettles of sweet milky tea. Even when I was only 7 or 8, I was considered a sophisticated city girl. And sometimes my cousins teased me because I didn't like to go barefoot and I wore clothes bought at the bazaar, not homemade like theirs. I had a city accent and spoke city slang, so they thought I was modern. If only they knew. People from real cities like Peshawar or Islamabad would have thought me very backward. When I was in the village, though, I lived the life of a country girl. In the morning, I got up when the rooster crowed, or when I heard the clatter of dishes as the women downstairs made breakfast for the men. Then all the children spilled out of the houses to greet the day. We ate honey straight from the hive and green plums sprinkled with salt. None of us had any toys or books, so we played hopscotch and cricket in a gully. Wonder what a gully is. In the afternoon, the boys would go off fishing while we girls went down to a stream to play our favorite game, wedding. We would choose a bride and then prepare her for the ceremony. We draped her in bangles and necklaces and painted her face with makeup and her hands with henna. Once she was ready to be given to the groom, she would pretend to cry, and we would stroke her hair and tell her not to worry. Sometimes we would fall down laughing. But life for the women in the mountains was not easy. There were no proper shops, no universities, no hospitals or female doctors, no clean water or electricity from the government. Many of the men had left the villages to work on road crews and in mines far, far away, sending money home when they could. Sometimes the men never made it back. The women of the village also had to hide their faces whenever they left their homes, and they could not meet or speak to men who were not their close relatives. None of them could read. Even my own mother, who'd grown up in the village, couldn't read. It is not at all uncommon for women in my country to be illiterate. What do you think illiterate means? But to see my mother, a proud and intelligent woman, struggle to read the prices in the bazaar was an unspoken sadness for both of us, I think. Many of the girls in the village, including most of my own cousins, didn't go to school. Some fathers didn't even think of their daughters as valued members of their families because they'll be married off at a young age to live with their husband's family. Why send a daughter to school? Sorry. The men often say, she doesn't need an education to run a house. I think I would argue with that. Think about it. I would never talk back to my elders. In my culture, one must never disrespect one's elders, even if they are wrong. But when I saw how hard these women's lives were, I was confused and sad. Why were women treated so poorly in our country? I asked my father this, and he told me that life was even worse for women in Afghanistan, where a group called the Taliban, had taken over the country. Schools for girls had been burned to the ground, and all the women were forced to wear a severe form of burqa, a head-to-toe veil that had only a tiny fabric grill for their eyes. Women were banned from laughing out loud or wearing nail polish, and they were beaten or jailed for walking without a male family member. I would be in trouble. I would never be able to stop laughing. I would go to jail. I shuddered when he told me such things and thanked God that I lived in Pakistan, where a girl was free to go to school. That was the first time I'd heard of the Taliban. What I didn't realize was that they weren't only in Afghanistan. There was another group in Pakistan, not very far away, in the tribal belt known as the Fatah. Some of them were Pashtuns like us, and they would soon come to cast a dark shadow over my sunny childhood. But my father told me not to worry. I will protect your freedom, Malala. He said, carry on with your dreams. I love Malala's father. I hope that you guys enjoyed chapter 3. I'm going to start reading now with chapter 4. I think some of your predictions about what would happen. Oh, sorry, that was chapter 2. I think some of your predictions about what might happen in chapter 2 might have been pretty true. So we're going to start with chapter 3 now. It's called A Magic Pencil. Okay? By the time I was 8 years old, my father had more than 800 students in 3 campuses, an elementary division, and 2 high schools, one for boys and one for girls. So our family had finally had enough money to buy a TV. That's when I became obsessed with owning a magic pencil. I got the idea from Shakalaka Boom Boom, the show Safina and I watched after school. It was about a boy named Sanju who could make anything real by drawing it. If he was hungry, he drew a bowl of curry and it appeared. And if he was in danger, he drew a policeman. He was a little hero, always protecting people who were in danger. Hold on one second, I need to pause. Sorry, I'm back. All right, so Sanju would draw anything and it would become real. He was a little hero, always protecting people who were in danger. At night, I would pray, God, please give me Sanju's pencil. I won't tell anyone. Just leave it in my cupboard. I will use it to make everyone happy. And as soon as I finished praying, I would check the drawer. The pencil was never there. One afternoon, the boys weren't home, and my mother asked me to throw away some potato peels and eggshells. I walked to the dump, just a block or so from our house, wrinkling my nose as I got close, swatting away flies, and making sure I didn't step on anything in my nice shoes. If only I had Sanju's magic pencil, I would erase it all. The smell, the rats, the giant mountain of rotting food. As I tossed our rubbish into the heap, I saw something moved, and I jumped. It was a girl my age. Her hair was matted, and her skin was covered in sores. She was sorting rubbish into piles, one for cans and one for bottles. Nearby, boys were fishing in the pile for metal using magnets on strings. I wanted to talk to them, but I was scared. Later that day, when my father returned home, I told him about the children at the dump and dragged him to see them. He spoke gently to the children, but they ran away. I asked him why weren't they in school? He told me that these children were supporting their families, selling whatever they found for a few rupees. If they went to school, their families would go hungry. As we walked back home, I saw tears on his cheeks. I believe there's something good for every evil, and that every time there's a bad person, God sends a good one. So I decided it was time to talk to God about this problem. Dear God, I wrote in a letter. Sorry, my kids are being loud. Dear God, I wrote in a letter. Did you know there are children who are forced to work in the rubbish heap? I stopped. Of course he knew. Then I realized that it was his will that I had seen them. He was showing me that what my life might be like if I couldn't go to school. Until then, I had believed a magic pencil would change the world. Now I knew I would have to do something. I didn't know what it was, but I asked God for the strength and the courage to make the world a better place. I signed my letter, rolled it up, tied it to a piece of wood, placed a dandelion on top, and floated it in a stream that flows into the Swat River. Surely God would find it there. I think that paragraph is really important because she's decided that she has to do something. And later on, I think we're going to find out, and we've talked about, we know one of the things that Malala has decided that she has to do. As much as I wanted to help the children from the dump, my mother wanted to help everyone. She had started putting bread crusts in a bowl on the kitchen windowsill. Nearby was an extra pot of rice and chicken. The bread was for the birds. The food was for a poor family in our neighborhood. I asked her once why she always gave food away. We have known what it's like to be hungry, Pisho, she said. We must never forget to share what we have. So we shared everything we had. We even shared our home with a family of 7 who had fallen on hard times. They were supposed to pay my father rent, but more often than not, he ended up lending them money. And although my father's school wasn't really making a profit, he gave away more than 100 free places to poor children. He wished he could have given away more. My mother, meanwhile, started serving a few girls breakfast at our house each day. How can she learn, she said, if their stomachs are empty? One day I noticed that some of our longtime students had not returned. I asked my father where they were. Oh, Johnny, he said, some of the richer parents took their children out of the school when they found out they were sharing classrooms with sons and daughters of people who cleaned their houses or washed their clothes. I was young, but I was old enough to feel that that wasn't right, and to understand that if too many paying students left, it would mean hard times for the school and our family. What I didn't know was that a bigger threat was looming, not just for our family and our school, but for all of Pakistan. I think that is telling us that's foreshadowing, telling us about something that's going to happen later on. I think you guys can all guess maybe what that is, what that thing's going to happen that's dangerous for Pakistan and for their family and their school. All right, I hope you enjoyed chapters 2 and 3, and I will make another video for tomorrow.